was going to be some sort of backlash, which I believe actually would not have occurred had it been printed.
Well,
after all, the British reading public is not less sensitive on the matter of Nazism than the American one. Everyone in Britain has been soberly reading reviews from senior scholars and academics on this subject for the last 3 weeks.
I would argue that publishing a book that's effectively anti-Semitic, and by the way, if you want to call Tom McCormick, the chairman of St. Martin's, a liar, who said that he first read it when the controversy was in full steam, and at that point concluded that the book was effectively anti-Semitic, then you can do so. In fact, 400 St. Martin's employees staged a protest at the building itself and asked that the publishing house reconsider its decision to publish the book. Also a factor you haven't mentioned. This wasn't outside pressure from elements in the press. You're referring in a vague sort of way, but I suspect you have some sort of specific cadre in mind.
No,
These are just people who were working at St. Martin's who didn't want to be associated with an effectively anti-Semitic book. Is that something they shouldn't have done?
There are many people at the publishing house who also said they should stand up to that and stand by their contract. The fact is, publishers do not exist to reflect public opinion or indeed stampeded opinion once it's been ignited by public opinion within their publishing house. They exist to make sure that the widest range of ideas are available to readers. And on that implicit contract, as well as the explicit one with the author, St. Martin's defaulted, and I don't know Mr. McCormick, but I don't like the sound of him if he only reads a book when it's got to that stage. But I do quote other senior people at the publishing house who said to me clearly that it was for them a matter of saving their hide and covering their derriere, if you
will. Well, your representation of Irving as a reputable historian who people in England are studying with great effect, I think ignores this entire history that we've been discussing. This is a man who said Anne Frank's diary was a hoax. This is a man who says the Holocaust as an event is open to doubt. And this is a man in this book, this Goebbels biography, based on new archival sources, says that effectively the Jews brought it on themselves. They goaded Goebbels. Weizmann, the leader of the Zionist movement, goaded Goebbels into severe measures against the Jews. And by the way, repeats the Hitler apology that defines Irving's argument throughout his work.
In that context, Christopher, asked this question: if in fact those things are true, that he said, he did say those things, does he still, in your judgment, can he be characterized as a reputable historian if he holds those views?
I don't have to defend his opinions. I have to only defend his right to hold them.
But you can, you can make a judgment. I'm trying to understand. You can make a judgment about his reputation as a historian based on what he says and the judgments he's reached.
I could make the judgment that he is a very major historian of fascism without taking any view on what he has said about it.
Oh, well, yes. This is true. You can say Faurisson in France, who says, after all, there were no concentration camps and no death camps, has the right to hold those views, and I wouldn't dispute that. But the question is, would you advocate that a major publishing house lend its imprimatur to Faurisson's publication?
I'll say this much in the matter of Irving. In his biography of Churchill, which I have read, has changed the way almost all historians view Churchill, especially his relationship to Roosevelt. His study of the bombing of Dresden, though it's very controversial, is a necessary book if you want to argue about the bombing of Dresden.
And his book, Hitler's War, is considered absolutely mad, and that it searches based on the presumption that there's a document in which Hitler would have authorized the Holocaust.
And his book on Hitler's War is thought by many people to be extremely eccentric, and he once lost, though he lost narrowly, but he lost a bad libel suit in a book about a convoy called PQ-17. Nonetheless, in my opinion, and I say it boldly and clearly in my piece, if you are interested in the argument about the history of Nazism and the Third Reich, David Irving is one of the people you really owe it to yourself to read. And this is an uncontroversial point in my country, because he has unearthed a very great deal of new information. His own spin on it is quite secondary to me. Most of what I know, I don't know about you, I've learned from arguing with people with whom I disagree, often very violently.
Well, this is true, but they're levels of the game. I mean, I assume that they're serious scholars, or people you would find serious in the sense that they unearth new information, who publish in, for example, the Journal of the Institute for Historical Review, which dedicates itself primarily to proving, for example, that there were no gas chambers at Nazi death camps. Well, there has been scholarship, Christopher, in those journals. Let there be no doubt about it. They have uncovered uncover train records that many of us who study this field didn't know existed. They go to the actual archives. Irving is not alone in finding real sources and torturing them for his own use. What you're doing, in a sense, by arguing that because he does this, he merits the imprimatur of a major house, is ignoring the implications of the book itself. And from that standpoint, you might as well say that a historian who marches in with a book that says slavery never took place in America, and here are various sources that demonstrate various things that are true about pre-Civil War American history, ought to be published by Doubleday.
If such a publishing event was to occur, I would expect the reviewers to be, and the readers to be the ones to take care of it, yes. I mean, it would not be for a publisher at the threshold of publication to suddenly think, oh dear, this row would not be worth the trouble. Now, surely I've made myself plain on this point.
Yes.
I also quote Raoul Hilberg, who, as you I know, is one of the senior historians of the Holocaust story, in many ways the original historian of it. His book in 1961, The Destruction of European Jewry, is considered to be standard. He said to me, look, David Irving has made me go back and look at things again. David Irving has made me re-examine things I thought I knew for sure. David Irving's made me go over some ground, ask me how I know things, and I welcome this kind of challenge.
Then let me ask you this.
It seems to me a perfectly simple, I don't want to cloak myself in the mantle of Voltaire, but a perfectly simple point, that it is not incumbent upon me to defend anything Irving says or hypothesizes in order for me to defend not his right to say it so much as my right to read it, which is the right that you are not taking into account.
No, neither of which have been called into question.
Let me conclude this with these 2 points, Christopher. One is that you believe, for all the reasons you've stated, that any major American publishing house should have published this book for all the reasons you've stated. Yes?
Yes, certainly.
Okay. Secondly, in your reading of David Irving, has he changed, in his historical discoveries, has he changed your mind at all on any fact or understanding you had about the Nazi period?
Not about the Nazi period, no. About the Churchill-Roosevelt relationship.
That's different, though. That's a different book and a different issue.
Yeah, no, he hasn't. But I think he has every right to try.
Eric Brandel with the New York Post writes a column as an editor there. Christopher Hitchens, Vanity Fair magazine. His story, which we've been talking about, is in the June 1996 issue of Vanity Fair. Christopher, thank you for joining us.
Anytime.
Eric, thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow night.